All right, folks, this is Marco Palmero, and if you are a boutique M&A advisory firm, a boutique investment banking firm, then this video is for you because I'm going to break down one of the key challenges that most small firms face when it comes to deal sourcing, finding deals, while at the same time, closing deals. And I'm going to explain how we were able to solve some of these challenges for our past clients, and also how can you potentially navigate those challenges as well. Now, I want to share some real examples of people that came to us with some problems, especially when it comes to deal flow. And we're going to be talking about the issue of having to allocate a lot of your time towards activities that don't generate the returns that you need. They don't generate the money that you need. And I think a lot of that comes down to the point that small M&A advisory firms, small investment banking firms do most of the stuff in-house, in most instances rely on their own network, their own Rolodex to find the deals that are then going to execute on. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way, because your experience and your track record is one of the most valuable things you can have. But unfortunately, that type of approach only gets you so far, because one, is unpredictable, two, is not something that is scalable over time, and ultimately you end up in a situation where you might be juggling between multiple things. You're doing a lot of work to source the transactions themselves. Then you need to also fulfill the clients, independently whether you have buy-side clients or sell-side clients. And then you also need to close the deals to generate the money. So there are quite a lot of things that you need to be careful about. And it's easy to get distracted. And one of the interesting stories that I want to share with you is a small investment banking firm out of New York that came to us because they were basically juggling between multiple tasks, and they were getting requests from new clients that they couldn't actually fulfill because they were taking on so many buy-side engagements, and then they had to allocate a lot of their time towards finding these deals for these clients. And so they were spending most of their hours and their team's manpower into sourcing the transactions for the companies that they were already fulfilling. And they had to turn down some engagements simply because they weren't able to scale and create a system that could allow them to free up their resources and allocate that time more productively towards closing the transactions instead of finding them and maybe fulfilling part of the process for their existing clients. And so fundamentally what they said to us is, Marco, is there a way we can forget about the technical side of things forever and just put on somebody else the responsibility of finding the deals? And the answer is yes. If you do have very specific criteria for finding deals and you have clarity on how you want to source these transactions, you can outsource the process most of the times, and to some respect you can achieve not only scale but also maintain a certain level of confidentiality that basically enables you to scale your efforts without hurting your reputation. And so what they said to us was, okay, do we have a solution that we can deploy immediately that will enable us, one, to offer a better solution to our existing buy-side clients, two, onboard more people that we can then fulfill on the buy side, and three, free up our time so that we can focus our attention on closing the deals, because that's where we make most of our money, right? Independently of whether you work on a retainer, on a pure success basis, or some other structured engagement, most of the money is generally made on the success of the execution of the transaction. And if you don't have enough time or resources to focus on closing on a lot of these deals, you're not going to make the money that you want to make, plain and simple. And so we talked with them about a solution to bridge that gap and solve that problem that they were facing. And I think a lot of that was playing into the fact that for them, sourcing was coming out of their existing network, as I said before. Therefore, they were kind of limited in the amount of deals that they could find within a certain, amount of time. So we implemented for them a system that was going on the offensive, that was basically sourcing deals off market through direct outreach to business owners from a variety of channels. We can talk about emails, calls, SMS, social media, letters, you name it. We built a system that was specifically created around the engagement that they were trying to fulfill, so that they can kind of like give us new requirements all the time, and we could plug them into different campaigns so that they could get different results out of each engagement, and can kind of like operate in silos when it comes to fulfilling their client. They had one pipeline that was for client number 1, pipeline for client number 2, pipeline for client number 3. And then they had deals coming in on all sides that they could actually offer to their buy-side clients to then create a more steady and consistent deal flow, So that's kind of like how we built the infrastructure. We focused on multiple channels, direct outreach, confidentiality, so that they don't need to expose their name when we were doing the initial outreach exercise. And I think one of the things that we needed to clarify for them, and if you're watching this video, chances are I might need to clarify, this point to you as well, is that not necessarily you should be doing everything from the very beginning to the closing of a deal if the activities that you are allocating your time for are not generating the returns that you need. In most cases, what we realized when analyzing the engagements that we were taking on was that they were spending most of their efforts towards sourcing the deals, but that wasn't generating the returns that they were expecting. And to some respect, it was even counterproductive for them, because they had to get involved in a lot of the technical side of the business, like setting up the machine, setting up the infrastructure for sourcing the deals, taking care of managing the back end and all that sort of stuff, that kind of like not only took away from their time, but took away from their mental energy and made them work on stuff that they were necessarily experts at. And so I brought that point to their attention and I said, okay, why don't you think about this from this perspective? How much better would you be at closing deals if you didn't have to take care of all these technical problems when it comes to sourcing the deals, and you had somebody oversee that operation for you, and you could just take the deals that are pre-qualified for you and then offer them to your clients and focus all your attention on 1, signing new clients, and 2, closing the deals for the clients you have. They got to the realization that would be excellent for them, because it would not only free up their time, but also enable them to focus all their attention on the few things that they were actually great at. And that was a win-win, because it was better for them in terms of peace of mind, but also better for the client, because they were able to provide better service to them and be more effective in their delivery. So that was point number 1 when it comes to challenges that many firms in kind of like small boutique investment banking advisors face when it comes to sourcing deal flow. Another aspect that is also parallel to this, I talked about this point in another video, but it's the topic of reputation, managing the way you present yourself, and also kind of like avoiding this problem of having to go out on the offensive and kind of like showing yourself as a needy person, so to speak. Most people are concerned about this fact when they set up a outreach system, or they kind of like build a deal flow pipeline that doesn't necessarily rely on a network, but it relies on trackable metrics and outreach solutions that kind of like go out and find business owners off market that are interested in selling. So most people are concerned that that type of approach might hinder their reputation, might affect the way they're perceived in the market. But the truth is, if you work with somebody that handles that process for you, you're never going to need to be exposed to the market in the first place until there is a good deal that is a match for one of your engagement that then gets introduced to you, because most of the outreach exercises are going to be handled on your third party's name. So your, company is not going to be on the line every single time you send a message to somebody else to ask whether or not they might be interested in selling their business. And, to some respect, I still laugh sometimes when they say something like that to me, because I don't see that as something that can hurt your reputation, but I can get where they're coming from when, they say, okay, we wouldn't want to reach out to a lot of businesses because we might look like the needy firm that doesn't, cannot find business through the existing network that we have. Therefore, we might look like someone that, he's not effective at his job. But the reality is, we're just talking about two different types of approach. On one side, we're leveraging your expertise, your knowledge, the network that we created over time, and that is totally fine. On the other side, we're doing like lead generation the old-fashioned way, right? We're going on the offensive, knocking on doors and looking at ways to connect with business owners that we might never find through your existing network. And that's the point, right? You might be able to leverage your network extensively and get very good deals over the line for your clients, but your network will only get you so far, because you're not going to know everybody there is to know, in your state, let alone in the entire United States or whatever country you're operating in. And so my point is, why don't we increase the value that you can bring to the table to your client while keeping your confidentiality and creating a system that creates both, inbound requests from your own network, but also goes outbound and kind of like attacks the market for finding deals, so that you can get these opportunities that, might not necessarily be available to you otherwise. Now, a lot of that system and kind of like infrastructure is layered down depending on how proactive you want to be in your approach. Generally speaking, we have a very baseline setup where people get access to a few channels for setting up a deal flow generation system, generally email, SMS, LinkedIn, baseline, 60 days, fixed setup. If they like it, then they continue. If not, they do something else. Then there are additional channels that you can plug into the system once you have a more structured backend in place. Of course, we're talking about calls that might require manual effort. We're talking about mail that might require an investment in terms of the letters that you're going to send out, and some other channels that you might want to integrate. But the point is, as you start building this infrastructure, you create a very strong ecosystem where a lot of these channels operate together and not only save you time and bring you more opportunities, but they create a funnel that naturally filters people through and nurtures the relationship over time without you having to be on point every single day. Because if you have to juggle between two things, like fulfilling the clients you have, closing the deals, working on creating these presentation decks, doing the due diligence and all that stuff, but at the same time you need to do the sourcing for new deals, it becomes a very difficult exercise. And I'm talking about that, because I've been into that situation before where, you need to close your existing clients and fulfill them and provide good service. But at the same time, you have other responsibilities in the back end. And when you juggle between two things, you kind of like end up losing stuff and kind of like missing things that might be the kind of like the strength that you have in the first place, and the reason why the clients sign up with you in the first place. Your attention to details, or your ability to spot things that other people cannot really identify. If you miss that, kind of like if you lose that careful approach that you have towards fulfilling clients because you need to juggle multiple tasks at once, you risk creating a situation that is counterproductive for both parties. And that's why we work with a lot of companies that want to just forget about the deal origination altogether and say, okay, Marco, just bring me the opportunities. You set up a back-end system that works for me, that I can check, and everything is consolidated in there. Actually, we have a very streamlined solution where they have all in one place. Documents that get submitted from people, all the leads consolidated in one place, their calendars in there, and all these things are kind of like wrapped up into an easy to understand platform where they can track how the funnel is progressing, see the opportunities that are coming in, and they get notified as people move across the funnel so that they can, they basically know exactly what's happening at all stages without having to be involved into the system. And so that is what we saw, at least, being one of the key factors that makes people want to build a system like this. It gives them control without having to be involved in the daily task and the daily management. That, again, even if you are not the person that takes care of these tasks, if you are kind of like delegating that to one of your team members, there are certainly tasks that team member might be handling that are more important than these. And so, are your human resources really allocating their time in a very productive way, generating the revenue that you need? Or are they just taking care of tasks that you don't want to take care of so that you can fulfill the clients that you currently have? I guess a lot of that goes into how can I allocate my limited resources in terms of team so that we can close more deals and focus all our efforts in there. And our expertise goes where is at its best, where we can leverage it the most. I think those are some of the points that we noticed when discussing with small M&A advisory firms, small investment banking firms. The challenge is always in juggling between multiple tasks and kind of like making sure the system grows and brings more opportunities through the door. Because if you don't have, let's call it a lead generation system that predictably brings deals in, then you're constantly working in a cycle. You get one deal, you close the deal, you're very happy because you made a good commission out of that, if you want to call it commission. And then you're back to square one again. You start to wonder, well, where my next deal is going to come from. I need to get back in the saddle and find deals, find transactions that are available. Instead, if you have a streamlined solution that brings you opportunities consistently, then all you need to do month over month is just find clients that want to buy deals or people that want to sell deals, depends on what you're currently doing, and then pick these leads and work on them. And so you don't have to go through this cycle all over again, but you just have a pipeline that is consistent over time. You focus on a few tasks that actually matter, and then your system can grow over time instead of going up and down all the time like a roller coaster. I think if you are in that situation, we should definitely have a conversation. I mean, we've seen that as one of the biggest struggles of small investment banking firms. Is like, they go through these ups and downs all the time, and independently of how many deals they want to close in a year, that is something that can create huge stress and huge discomfort because it is not a predictable way to run a business and get deals through the door. So if we can address that deal origination problem altogether, solve that for you, then you create a solution and kind of like a streamlined pipeline that delivers much better outcomes for you and the firm. So if you're looking for more deal flow, if you feel your deal flow pipeline can be improved, or even if you have a strong one and maybe you say, okay, I want to get it to the next level, then this is something that we can discuss together. I guess that we might be facing other challenges when it comes to sourcing deals. Happy to nail down those over a call. My team will put a link below this video if you want to check it out to book a time to speak with us. And yeah, then we will talk and we'll see how we can help you with this.